Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
And just like that, it's Friday. But there's no rest in here. We've got a really loaded 4-hour program to get you started and launch you into the weekend. And Virginia, game on. Today is day one for early voting, and we got you covered in every possible way.
Wow.
The first at 6:35, Representative Andy Harris, who's now the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus. At 7:05, Rich Anderson, chairman of the Republican Party in Virginia. 7:35, that's someone. That's Glenn Youngkin. That's the governor of Virginia. You think we want to get the vote out there, Old Dominion? At 8:05, our own Vince Colonnese is actually live on the ground at an early voting location in Fairfax. And then at 8:15, our buddy Melissa Roby, Rally for Women for Trump going on this weekend in Virginia. So we're all over Virginia early voting. And joining us on this beautiful Friday morning is the equally beautiful, marvelous maverick of Montserrat and eventually Massachusetts. There's lots of M's there, Patrice Onwuka. Good morning.
Good morning. Happy Friday, Larry.
Thank you. Amen to that. I've been waiting. I haven't heard you say Happy Friday in several weeks, so it's good to be back here next to you. I know. Way too long. Good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing great. I can't keep track of the news cycle.
We
but
were
I'm
just
trying.
lamenting how busy our life is right now with what's going on.
Oh my gosh. And then add in soccer and kids golf and the things that really matter in the world.
Of course.
Our personal lives.
Absolutely. When you're standing on the sidelines of the soccer game with your little, because let's face it, when they're 6 years old, 7 years old,
yes.
The soccer game basically just consists of a massive children following a ball in one giant clump around the field. So you have time for idle conversation with the other moms and dads.
I do.
Do they ever say, "Hey, I know you. I saw you. You're that one."
Well, no.
Oh, good.
Because it's PG County. But that said, I do have a neighbor who knows me. I didn't realize it. They are a WMAL listener.
Oh, that's great.
And they're like, "Oh, wait, you're Patrice Onwuka?" I said, "Yeah." And then they're like, "Oh, so you know Larry O'Connor?" I said,
Okay.
"Yeah, I do."
No, I wouldn't admit to that last part. Just say, I'm sorry. Who are you referring to? Oh, that's good. I want to hang out with you on the side of the soccer because you've got to engage in topics, right?
Well, honestly, I'm actually shouting. I'm at the
you're
top
that
of my
mom.
lungs, like kick out the ball. You got it, guys. Hang in there. I am shouting this, by the way.
You're that mom. See,
I am that mom.
I refused to be that dad. So I would just watch amused and sort of amuse myself watching, and then I would say, "So, what are you doing this weekend? What's going on?" That's the trick, where dads look like they're engaged. They don't actually make eye contact with each other. They don't look at each other. They're constantly watching the game, and they're constantly talking, but not about the game. They're talking about, going fishing or, their favorite hot dogs or whatever like that.
I do make small talk sometimes, but I stay away from politics just because I don't know where people are, and I'm not about to open a can of worms when I want us to be cheering for our kids together.
Go ahead. No, that's probably best. We don't have to have politics injected into everything. Thank you very much. Listen, we have a story that developed in the middle of the day yesterday, right around noontime, and shockingly, it didn't get much attention. But we want to bring it to your attention because it is a growing, sadly, it's a growing pattern of behavior that we're seeing in the unhinged political left in this country. Yesterday, the Justice Department announced the arrest of a man in Alaska. He was charged with threatening to torture and murder 6 Supreme Court justices. Now, remarkably, for some reason, they redacted the names of the Supreme Court justices in this indictment. I don't know if that's standard procedure. They called them Supreme Court Justice 1, Supreme Court Justice 2, Supreme Court Justice 3. But if you sort of use a little detective skills, it's pretty easy to figure it out exactly who they're talking about, this person is talking about. For instance, how about this one? Hopefully N-word, referring to a Supreme Court justice, N-word and his white trailer trash N-word loving insurrectionist wife are visiting.
I'm pretty sure that's not...
That's not Sonia Sotomayor?
No.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. This is obviously, a threat to lynch Clarence Thomas and his adorable wife, Ginny. And this language, by the way, this insurrectionist, why would they call her insurrectionist? Well, I'll tell you why they would call her insurrectionist, because for the last 3 years, the political dialogue in this country is to call Ginny Thomas an insurrectionist. That's exactly what the political left has done over and over and over and over again. And here's just an example.
What happened if Ginny Thomas ran for president? Could she be kept off the ballot? Because she's for sure an insurrectionist. Husband of insurrectionist, judging insurrection. Ginny Thomas, our insurrectionist wife of a Supreme Court justice, Ginny Thomas was materially involved in the insurrection. Must have been a relief for insurrectionist accomplished Ginny Thomas's.
Patrice, you and I are in the media, the electronic media. We have quite a bit of a microphone here that is heard by many, many people. Do you wonder if the executives at MSNBC or NBC News called Joy Reid into her office yesterday and played this video of her constantly over and over again, calling Ginny Thomas insurrectionist? I don't even want to start on what she is called, Clarence Thomas. And then said, look, a dude just got arrested for making over 400 violent, threatening messages to Supreme Court justices, and they used your words, your exact words. Do you think maybe we should re-examine how we present our opinions on MSNBC? Do you think maybe we can be a little more thoughtful in the words that we choose and what we're conveying and communicating to our audience? But I guarantee you that didn't happen over at MSNBC.
Well, of course not, because they don't think that their speech is inflammatory, induces violence. They think that they are morally superior and morally right. And unfortunately, a lot of the messages that he led, you can see the taint of a lot of the language of the leftists. Listen to this message dated July 5th. Quote, "We should make Supreme Court justices be afraid, very afraid, to leave their home and fear for their lives every day." That sounds eerily similar to something that Representative Maxine Waters said when she said, don't leave them alone, follow them everywhere. And so this kind of language does have a rippling impact, especially on people who have either mental issues or just have derangement syndrome against conservatives, MAGA supporters, and President Trump. And I'm glad that they finally got this guy before he did any damage. But, I mean, I wonder why it took so long.
That language actually specifically directed at the Supreme Court is incredibly reminiscent of this moment.
They're taking away fundamental rights. I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions.
That's before the Dobbs decision, by the way. Chuck Schumer standing on the steps of the Supreme Court screaming threats at Gorsuch by name and the rest of the justices. And, well, some lunatic in Alaska actually believed him, actually believed Joy Reid, actually took them at their word. We've heard a constant drumbeat that the Supreme Court is a corrupt institution and it has to be dismantled. And, well, imagine that. Some lunatic actually took it to heart. All right, a little bit more on this indictment because we didn't hear much in the media. It's amazing how mainstream media just ignored this story. Wonder why.
You would think they'd want to cover justice for the justices.
Yeah. A little bit more on this in a moment. It's 5:15.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price.
Yesterday, Merrick Garland announcing the indictment of an Alaska man for sending over 400 violent, racist, despicable, and explicit threatening messages that the DOJ found so credible that they had to take action for the continued harassment against 6 Supreme Court justices. And we know which 6, the same 6 that have been demonized every single day by Democrats and in the mainstream media. Don't forget, it was Joe Biden himself who just 2 months ago announced sweeping so-called reforms of the Supreme Court. And he said that it was because this current Supreme Court is threatening basic democratic institutions in this country and the rights of American individuals. This kind of rhetoric, it's not I disagree. It's not like we can make a better case. It's not like, we should win more elections so that we can have more influence in the courts. No. These people must be stopped. They are corrupt. They are ruining our nation. They are threatening. They constantly use the word threat. And listen, I am a First Amendment absolutist here. We should have the right to say whatever we want, but we also have to be responsible in using that right. And let me tell you something. If the roles were reversed and you could play audio of me like I just played of Joy Reid or of Chuck Schumer, and in some way the threat was targeted at a liberal Supreme Court justice or a liberal politician that I disagree with. Now, first of all, you'd be hard-pressed to find that kind of audio about me because I am judicious and careful with the words I use because, frankly, I think it's an ignorant, lazy moron who has to constantly use violent, incendiary language. That's just a sign that you're bad at what you do, Joy Reid. But I assure you that if these political roles were reversed, talk radio would be under threat. Fox News would be under. There are institutions, nonprofit institutions that raise hundreds of millions of dollars to monitor conservative media for the sole purpose of destroying us if we say such things.
Absolutely. Listen, there's obviously a double standard, and they're going to get away with it because the media is inclusion together, most of the legacy corporate media. What I find interesting about this Alaska man is where he put his money. And your money is part of speech. It speaks very loudly when you're willing to fork out $85, $100, even $25. And interestingly, according to these court records from the DOJ, he made 82 donations to Act Blue, which is like a fundraising arm, a digital fundraising arm for Democratic candidates, for the Democratic Party. He made a donation as recently as July 25th, but 82 times. So obviously we know what the motive is. I do not want to hear coming from the DOJ, we don't know what his motives might be. Right. We don't know what he's trying to accomplish.
We may never know his political affiliation. It's really
exactly.
Yeah.
There is something that needs to be done on the left, which is a recognition that not only have they gone way too far in their rhetoric, but that they need to be held accountable for the rhetoric that they have made. But that's never going to happen. I mean, I think the closest thing we've seen is Chris Cuomo on News Nation saying, whoa, I think we've gone too far, guys.
Well,
but that's about it.
And that's only
he's not in the CNN bubble anymore.
Exactly. That's only because he's not making his tens of millions on CNN, and he's on a cable network whose brand they're attempting to establish out there is that in some way they're more neutral than others. Carrie Urban, who is the senior legal analyst or editor over at Fox News Channel, you see her all the time on television giving her legal opinions on Supreme Court decisions and analysis. She pointed this out. She said it's disgraceful how little media attention this story is getting. This is specifically they wanted to lynch Justice Thomas and his wife and 5 other justices, by the way. She says, we're covering at Fox. I saw nothing on air at CNN or MSNBC about it at all. Coming up in a moment, President Trump appeared on Newsmax last night and was specifically asked about the Supreme Court and the nominees and the threats against his justices. You'll hear what President Trump had to say about this in just a moment. It's 5:21.
I would love to see what would happen if Ginny Thomas ran for president. Could she be kept off the ballot? Because she's for sure an insurrectionist. Husband of insurrectionist, judging insurrection. Ginny Thomas, our insurrectionist wife of a Supreme Court justice. Ginny Thomas was materially involved in the insurrection. Must have been.
There was no insurrection. No one's been charged with insurrection. And she wasn't materially involved. In fact, the J6 committee actually didn't include the name Ginny Thomas in their extensive report in any way whatsoever. That's slander, it's defamation, it's threatening. And now those words have been used by a deranged man in Alaska to send over 400 threatening, despicable messages, criminal messages that he's now arrested for. Also, remember the New York Times, sent an army of reporters to investigate the wife of Supreme Court Justice Alito for hanging a flag, a Revolutionary War era flag, outside her home.
Yes.
About that justice, he said, I would have no reservations about walking up to that Supreme Court justice and not asking him to take it down but to put a bullet in his M-effing head.
My goodness.
Words matter.
I mean, they do. And by the way, this guy used the N-word. I'm pretty sure that you're not supposed to be using the N-word on anybody, much more the two Supreme Court justices sitting on the bench right now.
I mean, Diddy used the N-word in his music, and look what happened.
Yeah, there are rules, Larry. There are rules.
Trump, well, I'm kidding, of course. Trump was on Newsmax last night, specifically asking about the war on the Supreme Court and his justices.
I'm very proud of the people I appointed. They have been, they've been abused by the radical left. It's play the ref, like Bobby Knight. He'd play the ref. He'd scream and shout and holler. But in his case, it worked. No. But they're playing the ref. When they go after these judges and justices, they do both. They go after them viciously. It should be against the law what they do. They threaten them. They mock them. But the public gets it now.
Where's Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, by the way, decrying what has been done here and what's been said about these justices? By the way, Merrick Garland, thanks for this indictment. Could you please arrest the people who continue to protest outside the private homes of these justices? They've been breaking the law since the Dobbs decision.
I'm waiting for that indictment. I'm surprised if it's ever going to come down, Larry. I wouldn't hold my breath if I were you.
I think you're right, Patrice. It's 5:20.
Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
5:36 Friday morning. Let's finish up this week strong and then get into the weekend. We deserve it, and it's going to be beautiful. Coming up later in the program at 6:35, Representative Andy Harris of Maryland. 7:05, Rich Anderson, chairman of the Republican Party in Virginia. 7:35, make sure you tune back here for Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia. At 8:05, Vince Colonnese, our pal, is going to be on the ground at an early voting location in Fairfax. And then Melissa Roby is going to talk about a Women for Trump rally event that's going on this weekend. We'll get into all of that. Speaking of Women for Trump, Patrice Onwuka is here. Good morning, Patrice. How are you?
Good morning, Larry. Happy Friday. We made it.
Thank you for that. Yes, absolutely. Happy Friday. After 3+ years of the Biden administration, through President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, the border czar, and the Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, lying to the American people, saying that the border was secure, that we had operational control of the border, that there was no chaos on the border. You'll remember, of course, then they all pivoted, did a 180 on a dime and said, well, yeah, there is chaos on the border, but it's Trump's fault. See, and that's the new messaging that they have. But we've gone from recognizing that they've been lying to us now to a full-blown Washington-style scandal with a cover-up. See, first you commit the crime, then you cover it up, and then you obstruct justice from being able to investigate the crime. Well, we're in the cover-up stage, and yesterday on Capitol Hill, Aaron Heike, a former chief Border Patrol agent stationed in San Diego, under oath explained exactly the extent of that cover-up because he was ordered to cover up the truth about our border.
We had an exponential increase in significant interest aliens. These are aliens with significant ties to terrorism. Prior to this administration, the San Diego sector averaged 10 to 15 SIA arrests per year. Once word was out the border was far easier to cross, San Diego went to over 100 SIAs in 2022, well over that in 2023, and even more than that registered this year. These are only the ones we caught. At the time, I was told I could not release any information on this increase in SIAs or mention any of the arrests. The administration was trying to convince the public there was no threat at the border.
Let's be clear here. He's just talking about those people crossing the border that they encountered,
yes,
of which they knew had potential terror connections and terror ties, were on the terror watch list. It doesn't even include those that they didn't encounter and don't know about. Those numbers increased from 15 over the course of a year, the final year of Trump's administration, to hundreds in the last couple of years, and they were specifically ordered. So the Biden administration knew that there were people who were on the terror watch list who had entered this country illegally, and then they ordered the information to be covered up, lest the public know that there is actually a threat developing here. And I'll put it as plainly as possible. The Biden administration knows that innocent Americans are under threat right now from terrorists who have entered this country illegally because of them, and they are trying to keep that information from you.
Well, and let's put that together with what we know about our foreign adversaries. Yeah. President Trump right now has active threats from Iran on his life. How easy would it be to send migrants through the southern border, killers, assassins through the southern border to get to President Trump? And we've seen with the lapses in the Secret Service how possible it is to get to him, or frankly anyone. Yeah. But we know that the credible threats against President Trump. Mm-hmm. I got to look at, how they, not only did they cover up this information, but according to this reporting here, how they shifted these illegal immigrants coming across the border from place to place. He said, quote, to quiet the problem, 2 flights a week were provided from San Diego to Texas. These flights simply brought aliens that would have been released in San Diego over to Texas. Mm-hmm. And the cost for each flight, $150,000. Yes. This was their way of trying to quiet the border-wide crisis. Listen, all the hemming and hawing about Texas sending illegal immigrants to New York City, flying them to Chicago, but we already know that's what the Biden administration was doing.
And they covered it up. That's the other key. Not only did they spend that money for those flights, but then they ordered the information to be covered up. But you send 50 of them to Martha's Vineyard, and it's a 2-week news cycle.
Exactly.
Then what about fentanyl? What about fentanyl and the data related to fentanyl on the border?
Fentanyl is another issue. The San Diego area sees between 80 and 90% of the methamphetamine and fentanyl seizures annually for our entire country. With little enforcement at the border, these drugs were coming through in mass. During my last year in San Diego, the price for a single pill of fentanyl, for example, went from $10 to 25 cents. To make matters worse, during 2022 and 23, I had to shut down San Diego traffic checkpoints, which are critical for drug interdiction, because the resources had been diverted to the process and release mission. The large numbers also had and still have a negative impact on the San Diego community. I had to release illegal aliens by the hundreds each day into communities who could not support them. To quiet the problem, 2 flights a week were provided from San Diego to Texas. These flights simply brought aliens that would have been released in San Diego over to Texas.
That's right, because Texas, of course, is a Republican voting state, and California is a Democrat voting state. And let's not forget, while all of this is going on, and we all see it, we all know it, it's obvious what's going on. We're seeing the reporting from Bill Malugin of Fox and Julio Rosas at the time from Town Hall, et cetera, and this is all we heard from the administration.
I think that the answer is no. The border is closed. The border is secure.
Is the border more secure under your leadership than when you started?
Congressman, the border is secure.
And on and on and on. And understand, Alejandro Mayorkas goes out there. He keeps saying that when we all see the opposite. And the next step he has is to call the Border Patrol and those in charge of the Border Patrol and cover up the facts to protect his butt, to protect his lies.
It's exactly the reason why Mayorkas needed to be impeached and, frankly, needs to be removed immediately. It's well overdue. But by the way, did you catch Kamala Harris brought down? We found something that a good that Kamala Harris brought prices down on.
Oh, hold that thought. We're gonna get to that in just a moment. You're right. About finally an economic success story, and Janet Yellen had something to say about it too. We'll get to that in a moment. It's 5:43.
Mark Levin, weeknights from 6 till 9
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
So, Larry, we were just talking about this, devastating testimony yesterday from an ex-San Diego sector chief agent on the southern border, Aaron Heike. And it was interesting. I caught something important for the Biden-Harris administration. We found a price that Kamala Harris brought down. The price of fentanyl. He said it went from $10 to 25 cents. So would 4 years of Kamala Harris make fentanyl penny candy?
This is huge. It's an amazing observation. I'm sure that this is going to end up in their new talking points.
During my last year in San Diego, the price for a single pill of fentanyl, for example, went from $10 to 25 cents.
There you go. Bidenomics is working.
Bidenomics is working. Now, we actually needed to work on we needed to actually work on something that people care about, and we know that's not going to happen. Interesting news, economic.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're joking about illegal immigration and an open border bringing down the economy, but actually,
Well, Janet Yellen.
Yes.
You have here Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, making the case that illegal immigration is really good for the economy.
Yes.
It's actually going to bring down prices too. So let's play cut 7.
Here's
Michael.
your Secretary of the
Treasury.
There's been a lot of debate about whether that would relieve pressure on prices or removing that many workers, particularly from agricultural and construction. What would that mean, in your view, for inflation?
Well, I think it would raise inflation. These workers have contributed to America's ability to produce more goods.
Let me be clear. What they're talking about here is deporting illegal immigrants, criminals,
a mass deportation
criminals
plan.
who aren't supposed to be here. And she's saying, well, that would raise inflation,
including agricultural goods. And this influx we've seen since the pandemic, and it's not only through immigration, it's also we're seeing the highest labor force participation on record for adult women. The influx of workers into the labor market is something that's helped to bring down inflation.
I'll tell you, I'll give them this, Patrice. At least they're honest about it. We need an open border because we need more cheap labor to exploit for our rich donors who prop up our party. I just want to put it in plain language for everybody.
Well, that's exactly right. We've heard a similar sentiment from Nancy Pelosi in the past. Listen, this is so disgusting what they're saying, which is that, for all of these years when you talk about ensuring that employers are, whether it's Mitt Romney and the people cutting his lawn are actually legal immigrants or not, for all the years of hammering corporations saying they're hiring illegal immigrants to undercut American workers, that goes out the window when you can bring in 11 million people here illegally, let them work for pennies on the dollar, undercut American workers and businesses who are actually hiring legal residents, American citizens, and pay these people a whole lot less because they're living in the shadows, then we know where the Democratic Party really is. They are not about protecting American workers. They're not about protecting American businesses or holding wrong businesses who are engaged in wrongdoing to account.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, this is purely about power. They want to bring in as many potential voters as possible. And hey, if it saves a couple of bucks for their businesses, to clean their bathrooms or whatever uses they think that illegal immigrants are going to be going towards, they're fine with that. Never mind what it means for American workers and for American businesses. It's so wrong.
It is wrong, but here's the beauty of economic issues. Ultimately, it's numbers. Numbers don't lie. It's either true or it's false. It either works or it doesn't, right? So you've got that fancy college degree in the economic stuff, whatever it is, right? All right, so help me out here. Mm-hmm. It's a fact that we've had higher inflation in the last 3.5 years under Joe Biden than we've had in 40 years since Jimmy Carter. That's just a fact, right?
That's right.
We've also had the highest influx of illegal immigration and illegal border crossings than we have, I think, in the history of since we've been tracking it, right? Mm. So if Janet Yellen's correct that having an influx of illegal immigrants is actually good for the economy and good to keep inflation down, right? She just said if you deport them all, that's going to hurt inflation. So by sheer logic, that means keeping and inviting more illegal immigrants here keeps inflation down. Then you see where I'm going here. I'm having trouble figuring this out because we've had all these illegal immigrants coming into the country and inflation skyrocketed.
Exactly.
And now we're to believe that deporting all the illegal immigrants will make inflation skyrocket. So how can the two things be true?
Two things can happen, and they are totally unrelated. Listen, the reason why inflation skyrocketed to a 40-year high was under the Biden administration because of federal spending and monetary policy,
and energy policy. costs.
And yes, thank you. And energy policy. At the same time, you had a bunch of people coming into this country illegally.
Yeah.
Are you telling me that every single person, as soon as they come here, they immediately get a job? Frankly, that would mean taking away a job from a legal citizen, a legal resident, a citizen of the United States, but you're going to put them to work, and that's supposed to be the solution to bringing down prices?
Yeah.
It's not causal. It's not even correlation. There's no correlation.
There's nothing there at all.
It just happens that prices are coming down because of interest rates rising, and frankly, because the supply chain has started to ease. Some of the disruptions there have started to ease, and some energy prices are coming down. And again, not because the Biden administration is helping either.
Kamlanomics. More illegal immigrants and cheaper fentanyl. There's your bumper sticker.
That's your bumper sticker.
553.